Hey guys, there's been a lot of talk recently that the grand jury in Hawkins County is set to meet in April, and a lot of people are really hopeful that the Summer Wells case will be on their docket. But this happened last year too, and people really got their hopes up, and there was no arrest, and we don't even know that when the grand jury met that had anything to do with the Wells case. But last year, you know, we kind of went through this with the Sincere and Classic, aka Orrin and Orson West case, where there was no talk of any arrests and a lot of information was not given to the public. Kind of everything that we learned about that case was boots on the ground, YouTube kind of people that were out and about. But as it would turn out, the grand jury did meet. And right after that, Trezell and Jacqueline West were arrested. So that came as like a huge surprise to everybody. It had been a whole year since those boys had been reported missing. And just one day, suddenly, there were arrests. So when the grand jury meets, it is often done in secrecy. In the West case, everything was kept very hush hush because, as we found out in a press conference later on, there had been concerns for some of the witnesses and their safety due to apparently some threats that had been going on. So everything was done absolutely, under the cloak of secrecy. And it is always a possibility that that could happen. The grand jury is typically 23 people who convene and they go over an accusation and see if there's validity to it before there can be a trial. So all we can do is wait and see. As we're entering springtime, we know how quickly that is going to turn into summer, and we will hit the 2-year mark for Summer Wells going missing. And at this point, we really don't know much. We are so inundated with theories and rumors and speculation, but we don't know a lot of facts. Going back to that very first moment when you heard the name Summer Wells, think about it. It was shortly thereafter that the circus began. I remember when I first heard this little girl, from the hollows, of the Tennessee mountains had gone missing. I just initially thought, wow, look at that landscape. Most likely, this little girl has, gone off on an adventure. She's wandered too far away, and God willing, she will be found safely. And it's happened. We've had kids, wander off and get found in, wooded areas and whatnot, even a couple of days later, and they are alive and well. So that was my initial feeling, probably the same for a lot of you. But things would get weird and things would get crazy almost from jump. First of all, the 911 call in and of itself was a little off because, first we heard that the 911 call said that this little girl had gone missing while mom was out for a walk. Mom has a lot of property, no big deal. Maybe she took a little walk, smoked a cigarette, did, whatever. I have said this a million times. I live in the country. And so I understand. I do not have as much property as they have, but I have a nice piece of property. I understand that that kind of setting has different dangers than, say, a suburban home would have. There is more likelihood for animals. There are more likelihood for getting lost, for getting into a weird predicament. Sometimes there's bodies of water, sometimes there's a lot of woods. There's a lot of things that could be really enticing to a little kid and can also pose very serious dangers. So, okay, mom went for a little walk being that it was kind of out there on 11 acres, I didn't think she took a walk into town. I assumed they just kind of meant in her general vicinity. And then comes back to the house and the little girl is gone. Okay, I'm not thinking too much of that. Then it got like, did did Dawn make the 911 call? Did Candace make the 911 call? I've even heard the boys made the 911 call. Did Grandma make the 911 call? Was Grandma awake? Was Grandma napping? Um, was Candace on a walk or was Candace planting flowers? It was just like a whole bunch of different scenarios thrown out there. And, at the time of a 911 call, yes, there can be a misunderstanding of what's happening. If mom called dad before she called 911, and dad is the one that made the 911 call, and he said she went for a walk because that's what he thought he understood to be at the time. I mean, that's not like, oh my gosh, they're obviously involved and they're obviously lying. A 911 call is made when everybody's emotions are really heightened, and it would be easy to misconstrue the information. So that wasn't huge, but it was kind of like, well, we've heard so many different versions. And then she's on the phone with Dawn, but then she doesn't have service to call 911. Let me tell you something. So where I live, most of my property, I cannot get cell phone signal at all. Actually, most of my house, I can't. So a lot of times, instead of like texting, I use like Facebook Messenger because I'm on Wi-Fi to talk to people. But if I were to walk too far away from the pole, I would not be able to use Facebook Messenger unless I was using data. But like I said, I don't get a very good signal. And I'm looking at her house, I'm thinking it's got to be relatively the same way, right? I actually couldn't even get Wi-Fi unless I put in my own pole because the Wi-Fi company said that there was not enough customers out where I live to make it um, to make it business savvy enough for them to even come put a pole in. So I had to pay for my own pole, the tune of like $1,000. It's like a 72-foot pole. It's crazy. So I'm looking at her home and I'm thinking like it's got to be relatively the same thing. Like you can't have a great signal out there. I'm sorry. So how could you drive around, whatever, talk to Dawn on Facebook Messenger, but you can't call 911? I don't know. A lot of people made a big deal out of the fact that she called Dawn before she called 911. I'm going to say this. I'm that person. I absolutely see myself calling my husband before I called 911. It would be like the absolute stupidest thing in the world to do. Yes, but I would do it because I would panic. And when I panic, I kind of would like naturally find myself looking to him like, oh my God, what do I do? Like, of course I know what to do, but like I would need that reassurance, I guess. I don't know. So I'm not even worried about the fact that she called Dawn first. Then Dawn does that interview, the one where he decides to say that he is going to see Summer again in the resurrection. And that's when a lot of people were like, what? He was so adamant that there was absolutely no way that she wandered away. Absolutely no way. Zero chance. Absolutely, she's been abducted. That's like a weird go-to for me. Again, living in a country setting like them, my first thought, if my son, who is, well, Summer's age now, not the age when she went missing, the age she would be now, would not be that he was abducted, especially if I've been on the property the whole time. I would think he has wandered away. He's stuck somewhere. He fell somewhere. He's hurt somewhere. He's lost. I do not think, I would initially think that he'd been abducted, even though he hasn't wandered away since he was 3. He kind of is old enough to have a little fear now of wandering into the unknown. He's still a little kid, capable of having a spontaneous thought to go do something. And absolutely, hands down, That's what I would be thinking. He has wandered away. I do not think that I in any way would be thinking abduction like right off the bat. But Dom's so insistent, which either means you just have all this faith in, at the time, 5-year-old child, that she would follow the rules, that she would understand safety, that there's absolutely no way that she would wander off. Or you don't want people spending their time searching the property because you don't want them looking about for a sinister reason. Or you just like absolutely for some bizarre reason believe that she's been abducted and you don't want them wasting their time searching a property because that's time that they could be out there finding the abductor. I don't know. But that whole thing was really weird. That interview did him no justice in terms of people now at that point beginning to look and say, okay, this is a little off. Your child goes missing. She hasn't been missing that long. And you're on here talking about the resurrection and how you'll see her again. So you're like relatively calm. But, you know, if he was a member of kind of, I don't want to say an extreme church, but you know what I mean? Like everything is like, it's going to be okay because God's got it. Maybe that would be something normal to say. I don't know. I would have to see how other members of the church talk. If that's kind of the way, you know, that they talk and the way that they believe, then maybe it's not as weird as it sounds to my ears and probably to many of you. And the behavior panel did a long time ago look at that interview, and honestly, they didn't see red flags. You know, yeah, they agreed some of the stuff that he said was a little strange, and his kind of lack of showing emotion would not be something that would be typical. But in its entirety, they did not find him to be deceptive. So, you know, I think we need to go back. We need to start from the beginning because through everything, there was so much craziness going on that likely we missed a lot of things. For instance, I didn't remember until I was looking up kind of those first couple of days. I actually forgot that the behavior panel ever looked at those first interviews. That interview and the interview that Candace did, the one where she said, you know, it was so overwhelming to her, it smothers me. And then a lot of, you know, people were like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? Like she used the word smothering, and that's got to be some like, you know, subconscious thing that she used that word. They actually found it to be a good thing that she used that analogy, that they felt like that was saying that it was so crushing to her that it was literally like sucking the life out of her. It was like taking the life out of her to be missing her daughter. They did not find any deception in either one of them in those first interviews. I actually forgot all about that. And now we know that, so body language analysis is not something that would be used in court. Just like a profiler, it is an aid used by law enforcement, but it absolutely is not the kind of science that would be used in court. So take that for what it is. But they absolutely do use it as an aid and, you know, rely on it to some extent. So I would put a little bit of weight in their opinion. So tell me what you think. You know, is it time to start from the beginning? We got so focused on so many other things that were happening daily. You know, there was a lot of YouTube drama. There was so much happening and so many other accusations that, you know, were coming into play with the stepsisters, and then, you know, the possibility of inappropriateness with Hunter, and like all of this other stuff was happening at the same time or shortly thereafter, that it was kind of hard to get every detail and to focus on it. So now going back and trying to pick up maybe little things and pieces of information that either we overlooked or, we were so sidetracked that we just didn't pay attention to. Like for me was that um, body language analysis of the first interviews. So tell me your thoughts on the very, very beginning, the day you found out that Summer was missing. Did you just think it was a little girl that wandered away? What did you think of the parents right away? Did you immediately get an off feeling, or did you just feel like, okay, these were, people a little different from you, maybe, if you're not from that area, if you're not from the country, you know what I mean? Like, did you just think, okay, they're a little different than me, but you didn't have alarm bells ringing? Or were you off put right from the beginning? Did you have that feeling immediately that something was wrong? And I remember it was shortly after that I found out that, Candace's sister had gone missing like years before. And then I was just like, what? I honestly, as time has gone on, I don't think that has anything at all to do with this case at all. At all. I know a lot of people still do. They think that there's some kind of connection. I actually don't. I think it's like a bizarre coincidence. But I remember when I first heard it, I was like, what? How is that a thing? Like, how do you have, especially for Candace Hara, like, how do you have a daughter and a granddaughter go missing without a trace in one lifetime? Like that, I can't even imagine like what the statistics are on that. Like 0.0000 negative 200. You know what I mean? Like that was, I just remember that being really bizarre to me. And I wanted so badly, conspiracy wise, to like link all that together. But over time, I felt like there really was no link. But what do you think about it? What do you think about it? What do you make of that? So we'll leave that there, and then, we'll kind of move forward, I guess. And maybe like the next video, whatever, we'll kind of talk about where it went from that initial moment as we learned about the swimming hole. And then we kind of started trying to make sense of that in our heads. But I'll leave you with that for now. And let me know. I'm really curious to know your initial gut instincts, not knowing everything that you know now, like just putting yourself back in that moment, that very moment that you heard Summer was missing. Was it just a little girl lost in the woods, or were you immediately in suspicion mode? So tell me your thoughts. Bye.